Get sweet child of mine. That's a good.
I know. I was hoping it was T Swift.
I think they reserved that for Craig. He's secretly a big Swiftie. I'm not even joking. Megan, thanks for coming. Let's jump right in. I would say about 18 months ago, ChatGPT was the shot heard around the world.
Yeah.
And since then, there's been some excitement about it. There's been some hilarious things about it. I guess talk about what you've seen in this latest bonanza that's really, really interesting and cool, and is there anything that gives you concern?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I think of to your point, it came out with a big boom, right?
Yeah.
I think of kind of like APIs 10 years ago. So when APIs first came out, over 10 years ago, it was like, oh, is this a buzzword? Is this really going to work? And I've been reflecting back on those 10 years, and I'm like, yeah, there are very specific use cases for APIs. It did change our industry, right? Like real-time truckload rates, real-time tracking, appointments, right? So we found, I think of it as like tech tools in our toolbox, and those solve those problems. So when I think of the AI, I think of the same thing. They're going to be very specific use cases that are going to help us crack some problems that we've just never been able to crack. And I think of those problems as like we all have so much unstructured data. And then also our customers and carriers, they require like personalization, customization. And so how do you do those things at scale? And I think AI is a great tool to help us solve some of those problems.
Yeah, agreed. So dive into these specific use cases in our industry. And is it going to be we're booking appointments, or we're negotiating with an AI agent? Is it going to be, where is it going to go from here?
Yeah,
in the industry.
Yeah, and I can maybe tell you like our story of how we first started, right?
Absolutely.
So when it came out, and you think over the last 4 to 5 years, it was all about real-time truckload rates,
right.
And like, how do we get those out to customers? And we used APIs, and we did, RPAs, and we did different things to get that. But we were stuck with email. So at Robinson, we get over 11,000 emails a day specifically for quoting. And we kept weighing the benefits and pros of do we build our own LLM? Do we do these things? And it was just really expensive. For that type of shipper, right? And so then when GPT came out, we're like, oh, yes, let's try it. So that was our very first use case we had a very specific business case. We had metrics with it, and we said, let's go use this tech to go solve that problem. And so we were able to scale, because I think a lot of people are like, well, can you really scale this AI? And so we were able to prove it with that business case. And now what we do is we think about, okay, we've taken that pattern, we have the whole shipment life cycle, and how do we apply it to all the different pieces? Like you said, appointments, orders, right? Those things that we have very repetitive tasks that we're asking our employees to do, we can start to apply some of this tech.
Sure. What would you say, talk about the impact on employees, because there's a, oh my gosh, this is going to replace my job, and then there's also oh my gosh, this is going to make me so much more efficient.
Yeah.
And then also on customers, because I have been on the phone with the robo agents and wanted to throw my phone out the window.
I have too.
But potentially this promises something better. So what's the employee and customer impact you guys are seeing early?
Yeah, and this is one of those things, there's been so many, because this tech is so new, there's been so many light bulb moments. But one of the first was, as we were starting to scale the AI, we require our employees to give us feedback. So when did the models work? When did they not? And, we even had, account teams be like, but I'm not techie, how am I supposed to? So there was these moments of oh, people are used to oh, something's not working, I put in some code, and boom, it works again. And here we're like, no, you got to keep feeding the model, and we'll deploy new models, and then it will work. So it was just this educating our employees that here's your expectations when it comes to this. It will work, and that will be off your plate. But when it doesn't, we really need you to go tell us, so then we can get the models better. So that's just a completely new way of thinking for our employees, and something I would say everyone needs to be thinking about is how you infuse it in your workflow, right? Workflow is really important.
When it makes a mistake, it's not time to throw it out. It's time to incorporate, the correct answer into the training step.
So we've been saying at Robinson, hey, there is short term, we need you to do this, but long term, it will get smarter and better. So again, I just think there's a lot of employee messaging that has to go out with us, and we've been learning as we roll this out, and we're getting smarter every day as we do it.
Yeah, and the other thing is, communicating with the employees that like this is an enabler, this is not a replacement.
Exactly. So we kind of even did a program. We've been like calling it the intern. So think of this as your summer intern.
Yeah.
So you can go on vacation, but you got to train it. It's not like, you get an intern day one and they can do everything. So that's how we've been kind of messaging and simplifying the message to our employees, that this is something that will help you long term, and that employee, that intern will get really smart and soon be an employee.
Well,
for you.
30 years ago when the spreadsheet, you had Lotus Notes and Excel out, and people said, oh my God, accounting, it won't even be a job anymore. And I think we're up 10 or 20x on the number of accountants since then for all the other things we can now measure and
exactly.
verify.
Like you can, my former background is accounting and auditing. And I used to sit with like paper and pencil, right? And when all this came out, it was like, oh, we're not going to need, but to your point, there's just more regulation and employees can do more things, right? You can do smarter things. So
what about the customer impact? Have customers interacted with AI agents yet, and what's the feedback? Do they even know that it's happening?
So we do disclose, like we say, this was generated by AI, and we brand those things. The feedback from customers has been like, this is cool. I like it. Like, because like at the end of the day, and like something we also have to think about is AI is not just there for efficiency and headcount reduction. At the end of the day, the important thing about AI is it's going to help with service outcomes, right?
Yeah.
So like if you think of appointments, if you can book that appointment faster, that will give better service to our customers and to their customers. So I think there is this misconception that AI is just about elimination, and it's not. It's truly about like the customer and carrier experience and improving it. So like when it comes to quoting, our customers like, I appreciate that instant quote because I needed it, right? I was going to have to wait, or something were going to happen. So at the end of the day, we're working backwards from that customer and that carrier to say, okay, what are the outcomes we're trying to achieve, and how can we use this tech to help them get there?
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of let it pick the low-hanging fruit, so that the human gets involved on the things that are really messed up.
Yeah, exactly.
not the minor details.
Yeah, exactly. Because like when it comes to quote, like I always call it at Robinson the swivel chair. So these things where we're getting something and we swivel over and we go look at data here, and then we swivel over and go look at data there. Like you can use the AI to like bring it all together to get that. So we're trying to eliminate swivel chairs.
So it sounds like you guys have had some early successes, but in our experience at FreightWaves and even mine just piddling around with various generative AI models, there's some pretty interesting outputs sometimes.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen any, as you're testing, any failures, anything that made you scratch your head and go, ooh, we got to change our approach here?
Yeah, and so, how we did that, and this is another thing when it comes to our employees, is prompts. So the AI prompts are what then help, what I call like the guardrails, right, or help you get the outcomes you need. And so what we've really done is, with our employees, is we did predefined prompts. So from our, like, I know you and I were just talking backstage, like we've been using AI, like when you're able to respond to something and click a button, it's doing it too. So we have been very, like, as we've been rolling this out, it's not like we just said, hey employees, here's a blank piece of paper and write your own prompts. Like that would be disastrous, and that would give a lot of outcomes. So, we have different UIs for our account teams where they click line haul plus fuel, or so we've been using the data to try to figure out what type of prompts would, like 90% of the prompts would be. And then that way, our account team sometimes are like, oh, I just thought I was setting something up, not realizing even behind the scenes, it's AI prompts doing it, right? Versus like technical code and those. So I think that whole concept of like no code, low code is really interesting, especially like for our tech teams. Yeah.
It was all low code, no code BI. Now it's low code, no code, generative AI.
Yep.
So talk about, obviously, it sounds like you've had a long period of like testing and validating before you just say, well, let's roll it out to customers and see what happens. Talk about the importance of that. Talk about, what it took for you guys to get comfortable saying, okay, we'll let this out of the lab now and see what happens.
Yeah, there was a lot of testing.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of testing. So, if I think, we would start with like 1 or 2 customers, and we've always said, hey, even as you get set up, right, for the different pieces of the shipment life cycle is what we're calling it, you have to review everything for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, right? Make sure everything's looking right. Like, so we didn't just, release a feature and then go like this, right? It was like, we were very intentional with like, let's go with 5 customers. Okay, now let's go 20. And hey, and we even had like a process of, you're going to stay in this for 3 to 4 weeks and then you give us the thumbs up, right? So like we had to think through all those things of just really being smart about it, because to your point, if you don't have those prompts and those things in place, it can go wacky really fast, especially when you're going external with it, right?
So putting up some guardrails. We
put up a lot of guardrails, a lot of Q&A testing, and then we're also like really working on, even when you think of the shipment life cycle, learning from all of it, right? So we take the learnings each time and say, okay, here's what we learned with quoting. Okay, for orders, let's be smarter. Let's do this. So we've definitely had a lot there, but it's really fascinating and interesting, and I really do believe it will solve a lot of problems. Not everything. It's like it doesn't solve everything, and I think that's the other thing is like people are like, oh, well, can AI? I get called all the time. Hey, can AI solve this? I'm like, no, not that. Like it needs to be, so people just want to throw that out and say, but like you have to be very intentional in how you use it.
Sure, and understanding that the training process, now with ChatGPT, you've got some out-of-the-box trained models, but it's got to learn your context.
Yep.
So one thing that we've talked about at FreightWaves, because absolutely we had employees going out there and saying, wonder if it can write an article about a ship that gets stuck in the Suez, or Houthi rebels attacking ships, and mostly as a wonder if it can. Still very much have a human going through and writing our articles and fact checking, because we've seen it make things up. But I guess talk about how you're solving the privacy and risk, because if you just go out to ChatGPT and you type it a question or say, write me a paper, write me an article, give me a headline, that data's in their system now, and you don't know where it might end up.
Yeah, especially when you're as large as Robinson, right, with all of our employees.
Right. It seems like there's a lot of risk of data leakage.
Yeah, exactly. So we're a Microsoft, we're in Azure, we're privately held cloud, and so that we were
So you have a walled garden.
We were secured, right? But we had to do a lot of employee communication, like make sure you're using this, like don't, so to your point, there's a lot that everybody's, having to communicate. And so people do understand the risk of your data being out there. So we were, able, because of how our infrastructure is set up, that our information was secure. But yeah, I can see for other people in the audience that could definitely be something.
If you're not doing the level of, we have a vendor, we have our secured environment.
Yeah.
You should probably have a policy.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you probably have employees that are out there typing things, into Microsoft's little input box. Or OpenAI's input box that maybe shouldn't be. Have a policy and think about it would be
especially think about pricing or some of those other things, right? That employees could be going out there and saying, oh, I wonder what ChatGPT could do with it. Like employees need to understand the risk of data being.
You are giving that data away, and it is now in a machine that you don't see what's happening back there.
Exactly.
And so that's intense. What advice would you give to anybody who says, oh my gosh, I need to start my research and development. I need to start a pilot project. What advice would you give them to maybe not trip over quite as many obstacles as you did?
We were definitely a front runner in this space, and it's interesting too, because I think there are people that are getting it to scale, right? Like C.H. Robinson, and then there are people that truly just don't believe in it or think it will go away with maybe some of the other things that have come out. But lessons learned, I honestly, even though it's tech, it's a lot of behavioral is where I think our biggest learnings came from. Is And my other recommendation is make sure you have a squad structure when you're doing this, right? So make sure business is represented, make sure someone from employees, your data scientist and your tech. Like if you just have your data scientist and your tech go in a quarter and do this, it's not gonna be successful. You have to have, you know, your different aspects of the business represented in there to make sure the flow. But like kind of what I touched on earlier, when we started, we didn't think of the workflow of the feedback loop, which ultimately became important as we scaled, because as we scaled, we needed that feedback, and then we're like, oh, this is kind of a crappy experience. We need to go improve it, right?
Exactly.
And so,
it's like the phone tele-agent.
Yeah.
If you called for your account balance, I would have looked online for the account balance.
Right. So we are now in the process, through the scaling process of now improving workflows, because you know we did a lot of sit downs with account teams, and we're like, oh yeah, that's not great. Okay, we see that now. So documentation is another huge piece, right? So as you're using the AI, you have to understand the process that the account teams or your employees are using. So there's a lot of information in our employees' heads. They know the customer really well. They know the carrier really well. That customer, since the customer and the employee have such a strong relationship, that stuff's not anywhere on system.
Right.
So as you start to automate and you start to use AI, you have to have that information. So we've really been pushing our employees to make sure things are documented. Okay, how did you make that decision? What did you do? We need to make sure that that's documented, and those are the things we hand over to our developers and our data scientists.
Because in a way, it has black box-like characteristics.
100%. Just like our employees' heads are kind of a black box, right? So
it is important to capture what did I put in, so that when you get output that is favorable, do that again. You get output that's not.
And then explaining the output, right, has been another thing too. So when it does output, like what did it use to do that as well? So those are and then just the whole employee experience, and then to your point, like the customer and carrier experience too, like how are you going to represent it? How is it going to be branded? Right, all of those things. So that's, if I could rewind the clock, you know, when we first started, I would
more holistic, you know, people, process, technology kind of view. It makes sense. Well, so like you said, you guys are one of the forerunners in the industry, and it's only been 18 months since we really kick-started this, you know, this period of uncertainty, this arms race, if you will. Look into the future for me, maybe 5 or 10 years out. What is this technology going to enable in the industry?
Customization, right? So if you think about the expense that it takes to have that customized experience for our carriers and our customers, that will be able to exponentially go faster in that area, right? I think that's a huge piece. Just the whole unstructured, I think we have a lot to still uncover there. And then as that unstructured data becomes structured, what are you going to be able to do? Like what type of LLMs are you going to be able to do now because you have more structure?
Of the unstructured data that you want to wrangle.
Yeah, the 50,000 emails we get a day, right? Like, I mean, talk about 1980s tech. Like we can't get our customers and carriers to stop doing things that they're used to. So I think even like just the old school behavior of the industry, being able to like wrap our heads around, hey, I think it's really about like meeting the customer and carrier where they are. And Gen AI allows you to do that, right? So think about the times where we're like, stop emailing us, go use this software.
And if it reads enough emails, it's finally going to figure out that Tyson is refrigerated, and you know, and Ford has zero tolerance for a service failure.
So I think our problems look different to solve in the future too, because some of the problems that have been age-old problems in this industry actually won't be the problem anymore because of this tech. So
very good.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be exciting. You know, maybe it's. I don't think it's going to take all our jobs, and Skynet's not coming next year. But exciting things out in the future.
Yeah. So I have a question for you.
All right, let's hear it.
So, what's your favorite Taylor Swift song?
Oh man, that's a good question. So we were talking backstage, and I coach my daughter's soccer team, and we always warm up to Taylor Swift. Let's see. You know, I think "Are You Ready for It" really gets them.
That's a good one.
That heavy intro that really gets them going. So I think that's probably the one I put on like right when we were about to go kick off.
It gets the team pumped up.
Well, Megan, thank you so much, and hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you.